Hi, I'm John Stevenson. We're going to be looking at Joshua 2, where we read of two spies, a prostitute, and a confession of faith. Joshua chapter 2 is going to be divided up into 5 sections. This is following the outline by Dale Ralph Davis in his great little book, No Falling Words, a commentary on Joshua. He points out that we begin with the commission by Joshua, chapter 2, verse 1, and then the spies arrive in Jericho, and they're protected by Rahab. That's chapter 2, verses 2 through 7. And then the central pivot of the book, really the big idea of the book, is the confession of faith that we have right here in the middle. It's going to be Rahab who gives her confession and tells about what she has come to believe. And then there's the sort of the drawing away action. The spies leave, and not only do they leave, but they promise protection for Rahab. You see, she had protected them, and now they promise to protect her, verses 15 through 21. And finally, the closing action is going to be where they return to Joshua, they make their report back to him, verses 22 through 24. So chapter 2 verse 1 starts off, Then Joshua the son of Nun sent 2 men as spies secretly from Shittim, saying, Go view the land, especially Jericho. So they went and came into the house of a harlot whose name was Rahab, and lodged there. I always think it's funny when 2 spies are sent. Remember when Moses had gotten ready for the Israelites to come into the land, he had sent 12 spies, 1 from each tribe, and 10 had come back with a evil report, and 2, Joshua being one of those 2, had come back with a good report. The 10 evil reporters, they had said, oh, the Canaanites are too big, their cities are too big, land is great, but there's no way we can take it. And Joshua and Caleb had come back and said, yes, the cities are big, yes, the people are big, but God is bigger, and we can trust in him. This time, Joshua, it's almost like he tells the 10 potential spies, you guys can just stay home today, and he's handpicked these 2 who go out, and they're going to come back with a good report. But they go to Jericho, and there they come to a house of a harlot, a prostitute, whose name was Rahab, and they're going to stay there. Now, Jericho's on the on the west side of the Jordan River. Israel has been on the east side, so first of all, they have to make that crossing. Probably, do they wade, do they swim? We're not told, but they make it to Jericho, and Jericho back then, and even today, has a nickname. You know how you have Chicago is called the Windy City, or New York is called the Big Apple. Jericho was and is still called today the City of the Palm Trees. And it's a name that really fits. You go everywhere around Jericho, and it's sort of flat and barren and bare, and you get to Jericho, and there's just palm trees everywhere. And so here was a place where there was some natural springs and water flowing down on occasion, depending on if it rained or not, from the Judean hills. But there was an ancient city here, and actually it was one of the oldest cities in the world. Archaeologists have dug down here and found very, very ancient ruins. So it was already a very ancient city. Verse 2, it was told the king of Jericho. Now, it was an ancient city, but it wasn't all that big of a city, and because of that, news travels fast in a small town. And it was told the king of Jericho, saying, Behold, men from the sons of Israel have come here tonight to search out the land. They were spies, they were coming secretly, but it didn't stay secret. Verse 3, And the king of Jericho sent word to Rahab, saying, Bring out the men who have come to you, who have entered your house, for they have come to search out all the land. And so sort of the jig is up, and they're going to be captured, or at least the attempt is going to be made to capture these men. Verse 4, But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them, and she said, Yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they were from, and it came about when it was time to shut the gate at dark that the men went out. I do not know where the men went. Pursue them quickly, for you'll overtake them. And it's very obvious Rahab is deceiving the king. She's lying through her teeth. And the Bible reports it without really dwelling on that. Lots of commentaries and commentators discuss this whole issue of Rahab lying, and is it a case of situational ethics, and was this right or was this wrong? And the Bible doesn't deal with it here. It just simply reports it and moves on as though that's not the big idea. The big idea is going to be the faith that she expresses in just a few verses. Verse 6, but she had brought them up to the roof and hidden them in the sacks of flax which she had laid in order on the roof. So the men pursued them on the road to the Jordan, to the fords. Apparently they had crossed found a crossing where you could sort of wade across. And as soon as those who were pursuing them had gone out, they shut the gate. And so the spies are trapped inside, or so it seems, and they've been hidden on the roof of her house. Now she's going to find a way to get them out. But right now the trap has been closed. Verse 8, now before they lay down, she came up to them on the roof and said to the men, I know that the Lord, notice she uses the name of the Lord. When you say the word Lord in all capital letters, that's the name of God, what we might pronounce as Yahweh. I know that the Lord has given you the land, and that the terror of you has fallen on us, and that all the inhabitants of the land have melted away before you. She's just giving them a simple report of what's happened. Verse 10, for we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the two kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon and Og. This is what happened recently in Moses and Joshua's day, whom you utterly destroyed. Verse 11, when we heard it, our hearts melted, and no courage remained in any man any longer because of you. And here's the confession of faith. For the Lord your God, He is God, in heaven above and on earth beneath. She has come to recognize that the God of the Israelites, that Yahweh is God. And He's God in heaven, He's God on earth, He's God everywhere in between. And by her actions of hiding the spies, she has cast in her lot with this God. Notice she says, we've heard these things. We've heard about what God did back at the Red Sea. We've heard what happened more recently with these two kings on the east side of the Jordan River. We've heard these things. It may be that the exodus from Egypt, the plagues, and then the parting of the Red Sea was the most evangelistic tool, the most evangelistic happening, the most evangelistic event of the entire millennia. That more people heard about God from that single event than everything else put together. We heard it. And when we heard it, our hearts melted. And so therefore she has come to believe in that God. And not just believe that He exists. She has come to cast in her lot, to place her faith, to entrust herself to that God. For the Lord your God, He is God in heaven above and on earth beneath. That's her confession of faith. Now therefore, she goes on to say, please swear to me by the Lord. Notice she's wanting to enter into a covenant. Please swear to me by the Lord, since I have dealt kindly with you, that you will also deal kindly with my father's household, and give me a pledge of truth, and spare my father and my mother and my brothers and my sisters. So this is going to extend outward to her entire family. And she mentions some, and then with all who belong to them. That's an extended family. That's a large extended family. And deliver our lives from death. And so she's asking, not just on her behalf, but on behalf of this very large extended family. And she asks them to swear an oath. That's covenant language. The covenant would be to deliver their lives from death. Verse 14, so the men said to her, our life or yours, if you do not tell this business of ours, and it shall come about when the Lord gives us the land that we will deal kindly and faithfully with you. Notice the language that they give her is the language of a substitute. Our life for yours. Our lives are bound together. If something happens to you, may something happen to us. That's the language of a covenant. A covenant oath says, I will swear by this thing, and the thing by which I swore by, if the thing on which I'm stating does not come to pass, then the thing on which I swore, and they're swearing on their lives, may that be ended. And so they're putting their life in place of hers. Our life for yours. This is what Jesus does for us. He comes to us and he says, my life for yours. I am given as a substitute for you. I have died in your place. And they're offering, in a sense, to die in her place if this word is not carried out. Well then, verse 15, then she let them down by a rope through the window, for her house was on the city wall. Now, we haven't heard this up to this point, so we're just being given new information. So that she was living on the wall. And so she's in just the right place to give them exit from the city. After all, the city gates have been closed. They're trapped in the city. And they're going to be lowered out through the window that is from her house. James chapter 2, verses 24 and 25 actually look at this event. And James tells us that you see that a man is justified by works and not by faith alone. In the same way was not Rahab the harlot also justified by works when she received the messengers and sent them out by another way? You see, she is showing by her helping them to escape, she is showing what she really believes. Her works, her actions are speaking to the faith that is within her. Yes, she is saved by faith, but that faith works. And the work that is accomplishing here, it was that work of assisting these spies to escape, these servants of God. Chapter 2, verse 16, she said to them, go to the hill country, so that the pursuers will not happen upon you, and hide yourselves there for 3 days until the pursuers return. And then afterward you may go on your way. Now notice that reference to 3 days. We've noted that, and a friend of mine, Warren Gage, has stated that every time you see 3 days in the Bible, look for a picture there of Jesus. And I think he's onto something. They're to hide themselves there for 3 days until the pursuers return. It reminds me a little bit of Jesus, who was hidden in the grave, that he died and buried, and then rose up from the dead to make a way for us. Notice, then afterwards you may go on your way. And not only did Jesus rise and go on his way, he made a way for us to have life from death as well. Well, the story continues, verse 17. The men said to her, we shall be free from this oath to you, which you have made us swear, unless when we come into the land, notice there's going to be a sign given. And here's a sign, middle of verse 18. You tie this cord of scarlet thread in the window through which you let us down. Now, it's an interesting detail. First of all, the cord is mentioned, but even the color of the cord, and that didn't have to be mentioned. You could have just talked about the cord, but it's significant, and that's why it's included. It's not just a cord of thread, it's a scarlet thread. The color of it is perhaps significant. And this was to serve as a sign to gather yourself into the house of your father and your mother and your brothers and all your father's household. That is, they would all have to be in the house where from the window there was hanging a scarlet cord. It reminds us a bit of something from the story of Moses. It reminds us of the Passover and how there was at Passover a sign, a symbol, a red sign symbol of blood that was placed over the lintel and on the doorposts of each house. And upon each of those where that sign was given, then the angel of death would pass over that house and not put the firstborn from that house to death. So, likewise, there's a sense in which Rahab is going through another Passover event, where destruction is going to come on Jericho, but it will pass over as long as this sign and symbol, this scarlet thread, is in the window of her house. This cord of scarlet thread, then, becomes the common thread of this symbol of release. Verse 19, It shall come about that anyone who goes out of the doors of your house into the street, his blood shall be upon his own head, and we shall be free. But anyone who is with you in the house, his blood shall be on our head, if a hand is laid upon him. But if you tell this business of ours, then we'll be free from the oath which you've made us swear. So notice there's an oath involved. It's a covenant stipulation, and the sign of that covenant is going to be that scarlet thread. Verse 21, she said, according to your words, so be it. So she sent them away, and they departed, and she tied the scarlet cord in the window. Now, we've noted already that there's a similarity. We've got the two spies, and they say to her, deliver our lives from death. It reminds us of Jesus, who saved us from death by taking that death upon himself, by going to the cross in our place. In the case of the two spies, they say, our life for yours. And Jesus says the same thing for us. He gave his life for us. The two spies were hidden for 3 days before they crossed back over the Jordan. Jesus was 3 days in the tomb. We've mentioned that already. The two spies instruct Rahab about this cord of scarlet thread. And there is in Jesus that salvation that we have by his blood, that which is represented by scarlet. And so he is our study in scarlet. He is our scarlet thread. Joshua 2, verse 22, they departed and came to the hill country and remained there for 3 days until the pursuers returned. And now the pursuers had sought them all along the road, but had not found them. And again, that reminds us of the one who was hidden for 3 days and not found, and yet has arisen from the dead and brings new life to us. And then closing, verses 23, 24, then the two men returned and came down from the hill country and crossed over and came to Joshua the son of Nun, and they related to him all that had happened to them. They said to Joshua, surely the Lord has given all the land into our hands. Moreover, all the inhabitants of the land have melted away before us. In a sense, they've already won the victory. It's already under assumption. Now, the victory is going to that's going to be a few chapters from now. But they already have the promise of victory. And we do too. You see, I haven't seen Jesus with my own eyes. I've never been physically in the presence of Jesus. And yet I have a promise of life, and a promise of a resurrected life, and a promise that one day I will see him, and when I see him, I will be changed. 1 John chapter 3, verse 2, because I will see him as he is. I have a promise, and therefore a victory.